Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Tuesday. This is Seattle Now. Some city and county leaders are calling for an end to a regional effort to solve homelessness after an audit found overspending and weak financial controls. KUOW's Amy Radil is here to help us understand what's going on with the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. But first, let's get you caught up. Microsoft and OpenAI are unwinding part of their relationship. The companies announced this week they'll end an agreement that gives Microsoft exclusive rights to sell OpenAI's technology on its cloud computing service. That means the ChatGPT maker will be able to work with other cloud providers like Amazon, and Microsoft will stop paying a share of revenues to OpenAI. In a statement, Microsoft says the announcement will give the company flexibility to pursue new opportunities. Overall, bird counts in Seattle have declined 21% between 2005 and 2023. That's according to a new study from Birds Connect Seattle. It also found that species diversity declined by 18% during that same time period. For years, the nonprofit has been studying birds at 8 Seattle sites, including the Washington Park Arboretum and Golden Gardens Park. The study's authors say the findings suggest that Seattle's bird communities are in trouble. They recommend immediate action to prioritize protection of urban habitats. And Seattle's next Director of Arts and Culture is set to be appointed today by the City Council. Amy Nguyen was tapped by Mayor Wilson in January to serve in an interim role. The office oversees the city's public art programs and awards millions of dollars in grants to artists and cultural organizations. Previously, Nguyen was the city's public art director and also worked in the city's planning department. Today's council meeting starts at 2 o'clock. We're back with more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now. The King County Regional Homeless Authority is in trouble, according to a recent audit. Auditors found weak accounting and management oversight resulted in overspending and money that couldn't be accounted for. At the time, the RHA was $44 million in the red. Now, some city and county leaders are wondering if it's time to scrap the whole thing. KUOW's Amy Radil has been reporting on this and is here now to explain. Amy, thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's start with some understanding. What is the mission of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority?
It was crafted by then Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkin with King County Executive Dow Constantine kind of around 2019.
This is serving the thousands of people who are sleeping outside every night in one of the most prosperous places in the country. This is a historic start in a new era.
And the one constant that we have seen is the needs around homelessness, increasing. And they were seeing that then as well. And so the idea was, let's not be fragmented and possibly, duplicating what we're doing. Let's take all this money and put it in more of a regional space and then give it out from there where everyone can kind of see what everyone else is doing and, hopefully draw more funders even into the effort.
Okay, so like an ecosystem of homelessness response. What do you know from your reporting about how effective the KCRHA has been at its mission?
It had some big bumps at the beginning because this was routing the funding that had been distributed directly from the city or the county in the past, transferring it all over to this different process. And there were even disruptions where the money wasn't getting to the service providers that had been promised. And so some of these fragile nonprofits themselves were having to go into their reserves and scramble to pay their employees, to give the aid that they were promising to people who were unsheltered. Some of this gets into really very survival level services of, severe weather shelters and things like that. It's not something where you can say, come back later. So the frontline organizations were having to deal with this kind of tumultuous transition from what we hear in the early years. We hear that it has gotten better on that front. Things seem to be going much more smoothly in that aspect. The other goal was to draw other cities into the funding, have it not all be on Seattle and King County. Mostly that hasn't really happened. In the most recent budget that they had posted, they had about a $200 million budget. Seattle paid for half of that. The rest came from King County and federal sources. So we didn't see the other cities come in as partners in the way that it was hoped.
Okay, so some trouble executing the mission there and some trouble recruiting other cities to take part in this effort. Now let's talk about the actual news, the reason we're talking, this audit. Why was it done and what did it find?
So they have a fairly new CEO at the agency named Kelly Kinnison, and she says she asked for this audit because there had been problems raised, in previous years, and so the audit was meant to really drill down on those and say, what's the current situation? And basically, the big conclusion was that the administrative inner workings at the agency are just really a mess. They basically aren't getting receipts and approvals for different things, and it's leading to a lot of overspending. So it said they found $8 million that couldn't be reconciled. They basically just can't track where it came from, where it's going. There was another about $4 million in what they called administrative overspend. And so those two numbers together, which includes also like $1 million of interest that they owe, basically those two numbers together constitute the $13 million that has been, one of the numbers in the press about what the audit found in terms of problems at the agency. I mean, they've had over $500 million in public funds in the time that they've existed. So on one hand, you could say $13 million is not that much given the scope of their work. The audit said it also did not specifically find any fraud or misuse of funds, but then it said the systems are so weak and so sloppy that they can't rule out that fraud has occurred. They said the funding is going to the service providers from King County for the actual assistance to people experiencing homelessness, but the problems are more about the inner workings at the agency. So this audit was released, and then everyone was wondering what was going to happen when the board had its first meeting.
And Amy, the board met on Friday. You went to that meeting.
Right. It was at the downtown Seattle library, and I hadn't been to this meeting before. So it said it was on the 6th floor. So I took the elevator up to the 6th floor, and I come out, and I'm basically just like in the library stacks. Like there's no meeting room that I can see. I'm wondering if I'm in the wrong place. It's like very quiet there. And then the elevator opens again, and King County Executive Gurmai Zahalai and his staff come off, and they walk into the same space in the library. So then at least I was encouraged that, we had to be on sort of the right path somewhere. And then it turned out it had been moved. So we all got back onto the elevator, which of course gave me a great opportunities. Journalists love to have trap elected officials in confined spaces like that. And I just asked Executive Zahalai if he's been hearing a lot about this audit since it was issued. And he just kind of started to laugh, and he said nonstop. And then we made our way into the meeting room where this board, which is made up majority with elected officials, trying to determine, what next steps are they going to take in the wake of this audit.
According to the auditors, Amy, are these problems fixable?
The auditors said they are fixable. That's the message I heard, but it's going to cost money and take time and political will. And, we see our newly elected leaders feeling some urgency to stand up shelter right now. And so to me, that's the tension between these two processes. Can they coexist?
Yeah, what would it take to fix the RHA? And like you said, is this what county and city leaders and homelessness service providers want at this point?
Yeah, I was, really just trying to gather as many sources of input as I could last week about what do people make of these audit findings? What do they want to see happen next? People are divided. Mayor Katie Wilson bypassed the agency in enacting some of her recent shelter legislation. Her statement said all options are on the table, so she didn't really say, that she's wedded to one or the other. Executive Zahalai seems more committed to fixing the agency. And then I'm hearing from service providers who are divided. I spoke with Christopher Ross. He's the president of the Compass Housing Alliance, and they have contracts with the KCRHA for a day center, a hygiene center, serving people in Pioneer Square, enhanced shelter services. So he says they've worked with this agency over the years, and he said they've had a lot of turnover, and, so has our political leadership.
They've grown every time, and they have really started to hit a cadence with the current leadership that they have inside of KCRHA. Again, we still believe that accountability needs to be front and center, but I would like to believe that they're at a point in time where they are starting to get some traction.
So that's a line of argument that I've heard a lot, is that the agency has had a lot of turnover. The politicians have had turnover. They've had challenges, but it is improving. It's going in the right direction, and we should run with that while seeking improvements.
Okay, Christopher Ross thinks they're just getting traction now. I know dissolving this is another option that's on the table. Who is talking about that?
Yeah, and people who support this idea just say this agency has been terribly flawed from the beginning. One of them is King County Councilmember Rod Dembowski, and that's why he said that he's bringing a resolution to dismantle it.
We wanted at the time to bring a regional approach to this problem, but the tool that was set up has been given more chances than it deserves at this point, and it has failed again and again and again.
So that was King County Councilmember Rod Dembowski, and he was joined by Seattle City Councilmember Maritza Rivera, and they are going to bring basically what they called companion resolutions on the city and county level that they say would unwind it over the course of a year. And then I spoke with Derek Bellegarde. He's the CEO of the Chief Seattle Club. His organization also has contracts with the KCRHA for rapid rehousing and other services. They're focused on serving the urban Native community, which has a really disproportionate rate of chronic homelessness. And Derek Bellegarde said he agrees with this idea of it's time to start over, that the agency was rushed and flawed in the way it was initially created, and he doesn't think that it's improving or improvable.
It doesn't matter who you get in later, it's still built on a bad foundation. And the only way you're going to correct that is tear it down and rebuild it.
He said, tear it down sounds scary, but he said, it should be a slow, thoughtful process. You got to keep these services going throughout whatever transition we would see. But you can tell from his perspective to the Compass Housing perspective, the opinions really vary among the people who are working with people who are unsheltered here.
Yeah, and certainly the stakes are high for the people who need these services, Amy. Practically speaking, is either option easier or have a smaller price tag?
In terms of keeping the agency, that might sound like the smaller price tag, but the auditors say that would require expensive upgrades to their systems. The auditors said they need to hire a CFO, which they currently don't have. And so those are some of the expenses in that scenario. And the auditor talked about how these are kind of like multi-layered changes that they would need to make. It's not just a standalone thing. Like a few years ago, they brought in Salesforce software, and they said that was a slight improvement, and that cost millions of dollars on its own. So this would be like even more complicated than that. Then if it gets dismantled, maybe the new systems could save money on some of the waste that's clearly happening there, like using outside consultants and temporary employees and stuff. But King County Executive Gurmai Zahalai said the agency, has run these deficits. It has $13 million in overspending and money that's not accounted for. So if officials dismantle the agency, those balances still need to be paid, and those would go to Seattle and King County directly to answer for.
Amy, is it likely that this whole thing gets dissolved? And if it does happen, what does that even look like?
Right now, I don't see that there are enough votes to dissolve it. And even the people who want to dismantle it say they still want regional coordination. They're not giving up on that goal, but it's not clear. I don't hear them saying, okay, here's what the new model might be. One interesting comparison is in Los Angeles County. They had a similar trajectory. They had a regional collaboration. Then last spring, they pulled out and they created a new department at the county level instead. So there are other examples out there. And if this really advanced that we were going to do something different, then, we might start trying to really research those and see what the options are.
And just for clarification and listeners' clarification, didn't King County recently have another audit with poor results? The headlines are flying out here. What is going on?
So now we're talking about King County, other kinds of grants for programs. A lot of them were kind of youth intervention and things like that. We did some reporting on some of the funds going places that they found a lot of problems, undocumented outcomes, kickbacks, conflicts of interest. Right now, the Seattle Times has a story about someone directing hundreds of thousands of dollars to family members without disclosing it. And then when they've looked at it, there weren't enough visits to those nonprofits that were getting the contracts. There was not enough tracking. So King County on its own has been plagued with problems in kind of its human services spending in recent years.
Amy, there have been a lot of stories recently about King County's ability to conduct oversight of its finances. And I wonder, what do you think taxpayers should make of all this?
Yeah, I think we're in kind of a crisis of confidence around funding for social services. I know Executive Zahalai, one of his first press conferences was about trying to put in, more oversight, more controls, kind of addressing that concern. And then Councilmember Dembowski saying, oh, well, maybe King County should oversee this homelessness funding if we dismantle the agency. And so it's kind of confusing, like, why would that be a better answer? He says it's because on the council, they're proposing creation of an inspector general at King County. So that there will be more places for whistleblowers to go and more oversight. And so he says that oversight could be applied to the funding for the homelessness spending as well.
All right. Well, what is next for the Regional Homeless Authority, Amy?
The CEO, Kelly Kinnison, says the agency will provide a detailed response to the audit findings in the coming days. She says they've made meaningful progress. She emphasized that the audit did not find evidence of fraud or misuse, and she said she is working to strengthen those internal processes.
And I know you're following this story. What are you watching for?
The agency says that they'll have high-level findings of the latest point-in-time numbers where we get a sense of how many people are living unsheltered in our area. Those initial findings, we look for those every other year in King County, and we should have those findings in the next few weeks. So that'll just give us a sense of the extent of the homelessness crisis here. And then I'll be watching those efforts to dismantle the agency and see if they do move forward at the King County Council and the Seattle City Council.
All right. Certainly a lot at stake for a lot of people. KUOW Courts and Politics reporter Amy Radil, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Trish.
Thank you for listening, and thanks to our generous donors for your financial support. Take a moment to rate and review the show. Maybe share it with a friend. Today's episode was produced by Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Andy Hurst, Vaughn Jones, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. Talk to you tonight for Evening Headlines.